Hello, and welcome to A Fistful of Dice. My name is Matt. On today's episode of Dungeon Master Forge, we're going to be talking about stealing ideas for your game. A lot of DMs feel the need to create everything from scratch. They feel like it takes away from their game if they're stealing ideas from other places. What they don't realize is that even if they're actively trying to avoid stealing ideas or utilizing other concepts or storylines or characters, they're inadvertently doing it just by absorbing different media, movies, books, playing in other D&D games. You're automatically going to absorb all of that information and use it in your own game. So you might as well steal ideas that you think are cool that would work in your game, and then twist them a little bit to work within your setting, within your storyline. Now, when I say stealing, I don't mean blatantly ripping off. I don't mean putting Darth Vader in your campaign. I don't mean putting Gandalf in your campaign. I mean using those archetypes, the archetypes that have been in fiction for centuries, and using those as tools in your own game to both make your game easier and also make your game feel somewhat familiar to your players. I always say that you want your game to feel familiar and new at the same time. So you want familiar tropes, familiar archetypes in your game, and then you want to kind of turn them on their head a little bit just to keep your players guessing. So let's talk about some of the stuff that I steal ideas from, and maybe that can give you a place to start for your own games. I love Magic the Gathering. I play it pretty often. My fiance and I play it a lot together. My roommate Darren and I, before I moved out, we played Magic pretty much all the time. And the art on the cards always gets me kind of thinking. It always gets the creative juices flowing. In addition, a lot of these cards have what's known as flavor text, which is little text that's at the bottom of the cards that kind of explains what the card is within the context of the world. Because Magic the Gathering has its own plots and storylines that are ongoing throughout the different sets of cards. So I might take out, a stack of random cards. I have thousands of them laying around, and just look at the art. I'll look at the flavor text. I'll look at the names. I'll look at the different characters and creatures on these cards, and I'll use them in my own games. I get lots of ideas just looking at the art. In fact, I'm going to be doing a video here shortly where I talk you through the process of coming up with a unique adventure using just a pack of Magic cards. The next thing I use a lot is video games. Now, I would say that, the less video gamey your D&D game feels, the better, just from my perspective. But you can still get lots of cool ideas for puzzles, traps, monsters, even storylines from video games. For instance, my fiance and I have recently been playing Diablo 3 together, and there's, Diablo is all about dungeon delving, going into dungeons and fighting monsters, getting loot. It's the ultimate power gamer's wet dream. But there's some really cool stuff in Diablo in the dungeons, different traps and even sort of puzzly aspects. Like, for instance, there was an encounter where we were down in this tomb and a bunch of magical obelisks shot up through the floor and began animating the dead. And until we destroyed those obelisks, the dead would keep animating. So it was a combat encounter, but there was something else to it. There was a little bit of okay, we can't just keep killing these zombies. They're going to just keep coming. We have to deal with these magical obelisks. And so that kind of gave me a cool idea for my own game, and I think I'm going to be using it here pretty soon. So look to video games, especially RPGs, fantasy games, things like that. I know I've gotten a lot of ideas from BioWare games like Dragon Age and Mass Effect and stuff like that, because those are very character-driven. So, just always kind of have your eyes open for different ideas you can get if you're playing video games. Another thing I get ideas from all the time is board games and card games. This right here, this is Boss Monster. I actually just bought this the other day. I haven't actually played a game of it, but I've been reading through the rules, and it's sort of inspired by the old 8-bit, 16-bit side-scrolling games with a D&D flavor to it. So you set up a dungeon. You're basically the boss of a dungeon, and you set up a side-scrolling dungeon with different traps and monsters and stuff. But honestly, this game is giving me some cool ideas about dungeon building and different ways to lay out dungeons. So, I really enjoy tabletop gaming of all kinds. So different board games, Arkham Horror, Agricola, Dominion, games like that. Those will give me ideas too. I just am always on the lookout for stuff like that. Another pretty obvious example of a place where you can get ideas to steal from is literature. This is the annotated Dragonlance Chronicles. Can you tell I've read this book a lot? I've had this version of this book since I was a kid, ever since my previous copy completely fell apart. I love the Dragonlance books. I love the characters. Dragonlance really helped me get into D&D back in the day, actually. And I've gotten tons of ideas for villains, plots, characters, even encounters and magic and stuff from books like this, from Dragonlance, from Icewind Dale, from Lord of the Rings, even stuff like science fiction and completely nonfiction stuff as well. Some literature that I read in college about psychology and history and anthropology can give you lots of ideas about filling your world with interesting places and people. Another thing I get inspiration from is books about writing. This right here is a book called The Wonder Book, and specifically it's about creating imaginative fiction. It's a world-building book. It's about creating an interesting world, filling it with unique characters, playing upon tropes and archetypes, and using those things to your advantage. This book is awesome. It's not a sit there and read it cover to cover book. There's lots of infographics and diagrams and cool art. Even just flipping through this book, I'll get cool ideas for different adventures and things like that. It has a lot of pieces by other authors. George R.R. Martin's in here, Neil Gaiman, a few other really good writers that I enjoy. So books about writing, about world building, imagination, and things like that can really help jumpstart those creative juices, and you can find a lot of ideas to steal for your own game. So specifically, Wonder Book, very good. I recommend it. And last but certainly not least, published adventures and modules. This is something I picked up just the other day. It's Legacy of the Crystal Shard. It's an adventure module that came out, I think, a year or two ago from Wizards. And it was when it's kind of in the interim between 4th edition and 5th edition, where they were putting out some adventure modules that you could play using 3rd, 4th, or 5th edition D&D. I'm probably not going to run this. If you've watched my videos for any length of time, you know that I prefer to create my own adventures, and I don't get as much enjoyment out of playing a pre-written module. There's nothing wrong with that. I've ran pre-written modules, but most of the time I'll completely overhaul them to fit my DM taste. But one of the really specific ideas in here that I'm definitely going to be using in my own campaign is this guy right here. He's a dwarf that found this special mineral called black ice. And if you've read any of the Icewind Dale books, black ice is a material that is basically leftover pieces from the Crystal Shard that was destroyed in the Icewind Dale books. And it's essentially, it's ice that is stronger and lighter than steel. It's a magical alloy that you can create weapons and armor from. But it's actually imbued with the evil power of the Crystal Shard. And anyone who has black ice on them for any considerable length of time becomes corrupted by that latent sort of negative energy. So this guy here, he sort of creates his own ad hoc market for black ice. He starts creating tools and weapons and little bits and baubles, pieces of armor here and there, and you can see he's actually completely decked out in this stuff. And he starts selling these to people. So by the time they realize this stuff is not good, it's completely riddled the culture. Everybody has some of this stuff. It's everywhere. And so it creates this very real threat of, you know, this stuff is evil and everybody has it. And there's a huge market for it. I really like that idea, and so I'm probably going to be stealing that for a campaign. There's lots of other good stuff in here that I'm going to be stealing too. Lots of cool villains and plot hooks and things like that. So look to pre-written modules. I've gotten some of my best ideas reading books like Sunless Citadel and Keep on the Borderlands and Against the Giants. You know, really like well-written, open-ended modules with plenty of meaty plot hooks and villains and things like that. What's the best idea you've ever stolen from something, whether it be a movie, a television show, a book, a video game, what have you? I tend to steal ideas a lot, and once again, once I steal them, I make them my own. I twist them on their head and I turn them just so the players don't know that I've stolen it. It's a really good way to create fun adventures for your party, and it saves you time as a DM, and it saves you a lot of headache. And honestly, your games are going to be better for it because you're using those pre-existing emotions and archetypes and tropes in your game. So Anyway, guys, that's going to be it for me. I hope these tips have helped. Take care, and happy gaming all.